Hello everyone, my name is Yo Ahn Han. I'm a Korean artist living in Boston, Massachusetts. And today we're going to look into stencil, how we can do simply at home. Let's talk about the inspirational piece from MFA. The piece name is not really known, but it's fragment of cotton, late 19th century Edo period Japanese print. And it's cotton plain weave stencil resist. The technique is also called katozome. And let's just look into that picture plane itself. It has a beautiful blue background, and also there are a couple different nature elements with very simplified version. So in this picture plane you can see plum trees, and also you see the stylized print of bamboo. Also plum branches are spreading out left and right, and it's a very beautiful piece. You can also see there are a nice play of negative and positive spaces. There are some circular sections of white background, and there's a black print on top of it. So it's really playing out of shape-shifting quality of negative and positive spaces in these stencils. And we're not exactly going to do the same exact piece from this, but we're going to definitely use the stylized fashion and how simply you can recreate imageries in this stencil format using this technique. So now we are going to talk about the material list. We don't need that much of the water, but we still need maybe a cup of water. The iced coffee cup is perfect match for that. And we need masking tape. And we also need any kind of scissor. And we need to have sponge. It doesn't have to be this kind of sponge. The ones you use for wash dishes, that's perfect too. And we also have acrylic gouache. I have this Holbein brand acrylic gouache, but you don't have to have acrylic gouache. If you don't have it, acrylic paint itself works as well. And I just in case had a 2B and 4B pencil alongside a metallic pencil as well. Metallic pencil is really convenient because we are going to have very sharp lines, but if you don't have anything like that, you can just use 2B or 4B pencil. That's fine as well. And another thing you need to have is cutting board, cutting mat. It's really important because we are going to use a knife to cut a lot of times. So this is a small little cutting mat, but you can have a bigger one as well. And if you don't have cutting mat, you can use a piece of glass as well instead of the cutting mat. And X-Acto knife is very important. It doesn't have to be look exactly like that, but this is really convenient X-Acto knife. You can always change your knife after you use it. And then when you just put it in there and spin it, that's how you make it solid. And after you use it, make sure you spin it off again and then put it upside down so it's not dangerous for you. That's all we need. Step number 1, the drawing part. In stencil, you just need to know about the negative print and positive print. In my previous work, I have this chrysanthemum. This is negative print, that is positive print. As I did in the previous way, I'm going to make chrysanthemum. So first I'm making positive print materials. So positive print materials is that all the pieces you're making is going to be cut out. So I'm going to make pieces of petals which will be cut out later. The important part is that when you're drawing it, you should not make a connection between them because the cut part has to be separate from the paper itself. So I'm going to make the drawing. I'm using 0.5 metallic pencil right now. And on the other side, I would like to make the same thing with the opposite way. In this way, I'm going to do the generic contour sketch first. This is going to be a negative. The one I did earlier was positive, and this is a negative. And I'm just going to get the generic sense of the chrysanthemum. This time, I'm only focusing on the shadow part. In other words, this is opposite of what I was doing earlier. It will be a little bit tricky for you, but imagine you're just thinking about the dark shadow part, shading sections, not caring too much about the actual flower itself. I'm marking as a scribble line right now, but you can just make a pencil mark instead. So the dark scribble line part is going to be where I'm going to cut. It can look a little bit confused, but when I start to cut for the second step, you get to have an aha moment. Okay, I think that's enough for the step number 1. Step number 2. So now it's a cutting part. So I have my X-Acto knife and I put my paper on top of the cutting mat. So I'm gently going to cut. When you're first doing this, don't rush it through, just cut it gently. Always nice to relax, and even if it's not cut right away in the first knife, you can always go back to it and do it again. And make sure one of your hand supporting your paper so that it doesn't move too much. And make sure you're cutting slow so that you don't have to tear that whole paper away. And when you use the sketchbook or paper, I recommend you to use not too thin paper. Doesn't have to be as thick as printmaking or watercolor paper. I don't do exactly stencil in my work, but I get a lot of inspiration from stencil principles. And even if your drawing is on there, your mark is on there, it doesn't mean you have to cut exactly the same. You can change slightly, more stylized version. Only thing you need to keep in mind is that each one of that cut doesn't overlap each other, so that they live as a separate entity. I have always liked chrysanthemum. It's really beautiful flower and also traditionally used a lot in Korea, where I'm coming from. And the way they grow the petals are so gorgeous and majestic. I made quite complicated shapes here, but you don't have to make it complicated. You can make it way simpler than this. I don't want you to feel frustrated when you're doing it. And this certain process is a lot to do with meditative, repetition related work. So imagine you are actually drawing with a knife. That's a great way of thinking about it. If you are confident enough, you can start the cutting part directly without having to do the pencil drawing. But probably if this is the first time you're doing it, it's better to do the pencil line mark making before you cut. I know it doesn't look exactly realistic chrysanthemum, but as we saw from that inspirational piece from Edo period Japan, we are making rather super stylized chrysanthemum. Oops. If that happens, you can just be more careful. The paper sometimes just tear it apart. This is not exactly too much thin paper, but still it happens. Even if I've done it for years and years, still every time I cut papers it surprised me. One more for the positive cut. That will be it. Perfect. Now let's move on to the negative cut. The negative cut will be a little bit tricky, but first we can start from the smaller part. Just imagine in the negative cut you are just cutting the shadow part. You know, every object when it's casting the light, there is a shadow existing as well. Just always think about in between the petal in the negative cut. Now I'm going to cut something bigger. Like that. Big shape. So basically this is not a flower petal. This is in between space. And when you cut the bigger part, make sure each cut has a little bit of space in between so that you can cut everything together. So this is a contour of the basic flower shape that I'm cutting. So that flower will appear slowly, magically. See, I'm still making a little space in between them when I cut the bigger shape, so that that little in between part will hold the flower not getting away from the paper. In this case, when you do the negative cutting, you want to do the drawing definitely before you cut. Now you see the left hand side as a positive, the right hand side as a negative. Step number 3. Now it's time to print. Yay! It's exciting time. First, you have to just prepare the new fresh paper, first of all. And I'm going to use masking tape to make it stabilize on the ground first. And we can just use white as a background to print, but that's something more predictable, so we're going to make more fun. So what I'm going to do before I do any of the print, I'm going to make the center part one solid color. I would like to use blue for that. And right now I have plastic, which comes with this other paper. So I'm going to use that as a palette. And I have all different types of color of acrylic gouache now. And I'll use this blue to use. And I'll just gently pull it out a little bit, like this much will be good enough. And what's important is, it's not watercolor or diluted method. You're not using too much of water. You're going to just gently use a little bit of the water, but not really a lot. And just dab it. Dab your color with your sponge. Oh, by the way, this is sponge. And then you're dabbing it to your paper too. So I'm going to just use the center part of that paper to be blue. And the thick, opaque paint is always effective whenever you try to get that texture effect from the sponge. So I keep dabbing it, and I don't want things to be too wet. As I mentioned earlier, don't make it too diluted. That's not going to be helpful for your actual print. And I want the center to be really opaque and getting a little bit of the gradational effect when it gets off the center. So this is the ground I want to work on. Now, I will use the cutouts. So the cutouts will be the main thing. So first of all, I want to use the positive print of chrysanthemum on the top part of this new paper. So here will be a great place to be to me. I want it to be here to be printed. And when you locate your cutout, make sure after you know where you want it to be, and you're using masking tape again to make it press it down so that paper doesn't move. I used the blue for the center part earlier, but the flower I want it to be super complementary, so I will use lemon yellow for the flower. But lemon yellow itself will be just a little too simple, so I will have lemon yellow together with more opaque permanent yellow. Deep yellow, it says deep yellow here. I'll start with the lemon yellow. I want the lemon yellow to be in the outside portions, and the deep yellow to be in the inside portions. Let's see how it's gonna work out. So I'm not even going to use the water, just going to dab it and gently dabbing it to the section. I'm very excited how it's gonna come out. I'm still using the lime yellow here, and I'm dabbing the deep yellow now to the center part. And I want to use that deep yellow for the foliage part as well, actually. Here, the stem, remember I made it? Make sure dabbing it evenly. I just want a little bit more of that lemon yellow to go over the deep yellow part to see how it's going to be effective, like this part or that part too. So these two yellow can be nicely harmonized. Since the paint itself is very thick, you don't have to wait a long time. You can gently take the masking tape off. That's what happened, everybody. So I printed the positive, and it's really nice. The yellow on top of blue is having a lot of a complementary effect, and when the flower goes on the top part, it kind of have this disappearing effect as well. So I have the positive print on the top side, and I would like the negative print to be happening in the bottom part. So let's see how it's going to be constructed. I will put it upside down right here, like this way. Press it down with the tape one more time. First, earlier for the positive print, I used the yellow color on top, and I don't want it to be repeating exactly the same color. So instead of using the yellow, this time I would love to use red. Let's use red. This is crimson, and I have the scarlet too. If all the sponge part is already used, then you can just wash the sponge and then squeeze it and use it again next time. I will start with this time the lighter scarlet red from the center, and then make the crimson red for the ground part. The scarlet red, I'm going to put it in the center. Getting to that point that we are doing the negative this time right now. So this is a crimson red right here. I'm going to put it right there. And I don't want these two things to be overlapping, so I need to be very conscious about the edges right now. I will gently pull out that masking tape again. Now I can lift it and see what happened. Oops. Now I printed negative here. So upper side of the flower, it's the positive part of the flower, and then bottom part of the flower is the negative. See how I mentioned about the contour part, how important it is? So all the contours are printed nicely, and inside the flower petals it's hollow here. And we can finish like this way, but I want to do one more thing. Remember we had this positive part of the leaf, but the yellow leaf is disappeared already, so I want it to be back. I don't want it to be here anymore. I want that to be happen rather this area. So I will re-putting that section here and tape one more time. I think that deep yellow was really fun and successful, and also I like that lemon yellow too, so I'm going to use both of the color here, and that will be it. I'm not doing the flower, only the leaves. Dabbing, dabbing, it's all about dabbing. I'm so curious what's gonna happen here. Something good will happen, something fun will be happening. All right, that's it. So I'm going to lift it up. All right, so I got my leaf back. This is it. So I just showed a very simple way to make a stencil, and you have top and bottom part of that chrysanthemum. One is a positive, one is a negative. And you can do on top of it on infinite amount of time. You can you reuse the cut part of the stencil over and over again, but make sure after you use one time, let it dry and then do it again, so that you can make a pretty complicated shape as well as very simple ones. And thanks for going with this whole journey with me.